In this video, we are going to be talking about the 1943 film noir directed by Alfred Hitchcock, Shadow of a Doubt, which starred Teresa Wright and Joseph Cotten. And my guest today is film critic and former host of TVO's Saturday Night at the Movies. I want to welcome back Thom Ernst. Thom, thanks again for joining me.
Excellent. I'm always happy to be here. And you know what? I was thinking, if in the way of former host of Saturday Night, I also did a show, and it always kind of gets swept away, called making movies the Canadian way.
Oh yeah.
And the reason I said it, I was just going through my files this morning, getting ready for this, and I saw that there was a whole bunch of episodes still on my computer, and I thought, I got very nostalgic for it, so I thought I'd throw that in too, because it's the lesser known Thom Ernst effort.
And a lot of those are still on YouTube, I believe, because I've seen a few of them on there.
Yeah, I mean, I put them on YouTube because I don't think they're airing anymore on Bell. So I put them there, and watch them. I think they're fun.
Yeah, no, I've been meaning to see more of them because I thought it was a really great show. So I'm curious with Hitchcock, because I haven't discussed Hitchcock with you in the past before. So have you always been a big Hitchcock fan, or did your interest in him come later on in your cinephile journey?
I think as a kid, there's just something you can't overlook the impact something like Psycho and Birds had on a young mind, on a young kid, and how fascinating those movies were. Even if just by reputation, I may not have even seen them yet, and knew of them,
right,
and so was excited about it. So Alfred Hitchcock very well could have been the first director I knew by name. I have no guarantee of that, but it would make sense, because his movies, he was as big as the movies.
Yeah.
And I also suspect he probably was the first director to have a television face, and represented in, he was represented in my Bugs Bunny cartoons, and
right,
all sorts of things. So I knew of him early on. I liked him early on because of the Birds and Psycho. And then going through his films, they were just one good one after another.
Do you see this as a film noir? And if so, I was curious how.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you see it as a film noir right from the beginning, meaning the title. Shadow of a Doubt is a noir title. It just, it's right there. It's perfect because it obviously predates Lynch. Lynch's Blue Velvet, but it is very blue velvety.
Yeah.
And if right from the beginning of the film, where you've got the waterfront dump area with rusted barrels that look very toxic, and then you go to a tenement where kids are playing on the street, etc., which is fine in New York City and things like that. But if you're living in a peaceful suburb somewhere, playing on the street with a fire hydrant feels it feels otherly, and it feels less than. So yes, I think it's very much a film noir, because we are starting off with someone who, to all appearances, is hiding out, right? He's not a guy who's down on his luck. You can tell that by his attitude right away.
Yeah,
but
he's totally confident.
He's confident, but not the good kind. The confidence that sort of barrels down on people that he perceives as less than him,
right?
Which, quite frankly, is everyone.
Yeah, that's actually, it's funny. I didn't look at it that way, and that ultimately leads to his downfall. And of course, Hitchcock, he tells you right away that the guy's guilty by purely visual form, by showing the money, showing the cops outside, and him clearly not wanting to be seen. I mean, at that point, you don't know exactly what he did, but he's telling you that he's guilty right off the top. Whereas
But in the
usually his
film,
films are the man on the run, the innocent man on the run. But this one is a guilty man on the run. So he
yeah,
really flipped the switch.
he did. And the film wouldn't work if he tried to play it as a mystery.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's much more the suspense that we the audience know more than the characters. So, that's where we're involved on that emotional level. That once he sees, he goes to the small town, he sees Teresa Wright, and everyone loves him, but we know that this guy is not someone to be easily as loved as everyone is loving him.
and
So
and I watched carefully this time around because I watched it again. The reaction of the sister when she gets the phone call that he's coming, because this is a woman who's seen him grow up. And if he's a psychopath, possibly have seen things that upset her or at least make her concerned, but there's not that concern.
yeah,
So clearly he is one of those psychopaths that were able to mask everything
yes, yeah,
throughout his
exactly.
entire life.
Yeah, and I think Hitchcock portrays them as being, I imagine he intentionally portrays them as being purely innocent and not very bright, as opposed to the daughter who's so smart, and this telepathic connection that she has with her uncle Charlie. They both have the same name, of course, as we know, and everyone says they're so much alike. They're like twins. There's this instant deep love for one another, and she eventually puts it all together, but it goes well over everyone's head, and just that small town environment. And as Hitchcock said, the reason he was attracted to this was he loved the fact that it was someone wrecking havoc in a small town. He just he got a kick out of that. It's interesting with film noir because some people think that there are purists who think they have to have someone who's decent and perhaps falsely accused or ends up doing the wrong thing, but is purely ultimately decent, and they have to have a femme fatale and all these sort of rules. But I mean, do you think that it is that sort of calculated, or is it much looser, this film noir genre, so to speak?
If I was to be in a room with an Eddie Mueller or somebody like that, and they took that stance, I probably wouldn't argue them on it, because you're right, there is no femme fatale in this. And the innocent is Teresa Wright's character, Charlie.
Yeah.
So no, I think in a way, as a young man, I always saw Hitchcock as more of a horror director because I knew Birds and Psycho, and those fall into that category.
That's how I always saw him as well early on.
Yeah. And I think that and Frenzy, I think that this is horror light, I guess. You're inviting a monster into your room, and I think that if this film were made today, it might fall under the category of horror, because that's become a looser term.
Right.
I do feel like it's film noir simply because we're dealing with a man whose morals are questionable. Well, look at Double Indemnity. There we have a character who basically we're following the bad guys.
Yes.
In Double Indemnity. So, and you can't argue that's not a film noir. And the femme fatale is hand in hand with the culprit.
Right.
So I think there's a really good argument for Shadow of a Doubt being a film noir. I don't think the shadows and the looming, there's not that sort of Fritz Lang type of shadows coming in the room and things like that I tend to associate with film noir. And matter of fact, it's all quite bright and open.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I think for me, where it stands out as film noir is, as you said, the innocent here is actually Teresa Wright, and her morals come into question when she has to make that choice. Do I turn my uncle in once she has the evidence. Of course, you know, the ring that he gave her, and she puts it together because the initials were the same as the women killed in the newspaper that she found. And she has to make that choice. Does she do the right thing and turn him in, or does she let him go because she loves him? And as she put it, this would kill her family. Like, her mother was so innocent and so vulnerable and fragile, and the you know, it's a small town. I mean, the father works at a bank, and what is that going to mean to him that there's this scandal? And really, she was going to let it go, and she let it go right till the end. You know, even when he dies, no one knows what happened. I mean, no one knows the truth other than her and the detective. Of course, that love story, and he's totally understandable. And really, it's not so black and white. I mean, she's not all good, even as good as she seems. You know, she makes that. Well, that's a very noir, you know, theme.
Well, and think of that, turning him in, and risking the you know, the smearing of her family name. Although I always think, perhaps I'm naive, I always think when those things happen in films that they're over assuming what's going to happen, but maybe not. Maybe people would react that way. But what does she choose to do? She chooses instead something far more malicious. You know, having him dead and no one know is an easier answer, but
Yeah.
it is the more villainous.
Absolutely.
So she does this sweet innocent girl have that in her. I don't think Hitchcock explores that deep enough
No.
to resonate with audiences of the time, but I bet you in his little sort of mind that he knew that Teresa Wright or Charlie was not as innocent as the audience still today thinks she is.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And you know, we also see with Joseph Cotton, he's motivated by money, which is a very, you know, well, this is during the war, but post World War II theme a lot in noir, is that people wanting money at all costs, and that consumerism and capitalist nature that was really booming at that time. And he's willing to kill to get money from these widows who inherited money that he feels they don't deserve it because they didn't work for it. And he's, you know, the irony and the contradiction with Charlie the uncle is that he loves his sister so much and he loves his niece so much, but yet he's a total sexist. I mean, he's so cynical, and he says awful things about women at the dinner table when he lets out some of his opinions that I don't think he meant to leave out about, you know, women, some of these widows being fat wives and that they're useless and all that kind of stuff. And that is a very noir thing of people being so motivated by either sex or money, or a combination of the two.
Often in noir, women are motivated by money and men are motivated by sex. Yeah. And that tends to be the driving force in things like Double Indemnity and Body Heat.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you brought up, sexism, which is something I really found interesting in this film, knowing that Hitchcock himself wasn't the kindest man to women, and enough so that if you were, and I'm not saying you should do this, but if you were of the kind to alienate someone's work because of their personal life, you could easily alienate Hitchcock.
Oh, yes.
For the way he treated women, particularly his cast.
Yeah.
I don't know about Alma. I've never really got a grip on exactly how their relationship worked. I think it was probably one of understanding.
It's very mysterious. I mean, you know, there's only so much anyone could know unless you lived with them.
Yeah. And of course, you probably know that she had her part in writing the script for this film.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, my point is, the women in this movie, with the exception of the mother, Teresa Wright and the little girl whose name is
Anne Newton was the little girl.
She's
Yeah.
great in that film.
Yeah, I agree.
But what I find fascinating, one of the first things that the father says in the film, and it's a throwaway line and it's a joke, is when there's an important phone call and he walks away saying, important phone call for the mother, and he walks away saying, oh, if your mother's sister got her license, we're all in trouble.
Right,
that's the kind of throwaway women can't drive sexist line.
Yeah.
But the women, particularly the young girls, are very smart. Charlie is really astute politically.
Yeah.
And she speaks her mind. She doesn't back down to either parent.
No, that's true.
Yeah, and also Annie is really, her nose is in the book. What are you reading? Ivanhoe. And
That's right.
that floors the father.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Hitchcock, who is sexist in so many in the way he treats women, or at least we've learned that about him, or at least we've been told that this is true, should have characters in this film that were so strong and independent. And I find that kind of remarkable, this kind of feminist, like I guess it sort of decries the kind of misogyny that that in fact Hitchcock ignored himself in his life.
I mean, Charlie, the niece, had to be smarter than everybody else in order to really see what, put the clues together and follow the evidence. And I also thought it was interesting visually when we see Joseph Cotton, he's lying on a bed when we first see him, and when we first see her, she's also lying in the same position. And I like how what she was saying, like, everyone else seems to be sleepwalking through life, work, home, bed, work, home, bed. And she's more attuned to understanding that life is not about that, and that that's making her unhappy, which of course brings not that the film is about that, but I think that was ultimately that they were saying this woman is ahead of everybody else. And when Uncle Charlie comes in, she's really the only one who's going to be able to figure this out.
The film is filled with dualities between Charlie and her uncle, like the lying in bed, but not just lying in the bed. Someone comes to her doorway, and speaks to her. So it's not just physical, like the whole thing. Watch when Uncle Charlie, if you see the film again, watch when Uncle Charlie is on the phone making the call to the telegram, making it, the telegram to have it delivered. Someone's playing pool in the background with a hat, playing snooker. Somebody comes into the scene wearing a hat, standing beside him, and playing. So there's the duality again. It's over and over and over. I'm not sure if he's saying everybody has sort of an emotional or a psychic doppelganger of sorts, but so much of those earlier scenes are actually copied scenes, or two people look very similar. And there's other things that happen.
You're right. He has the ongoing motif of duality. Even, I don't know if you noticed, but when they go to that cocktail bar, it was called Till 2. And there's that picture on the door that he hangs on it for a second that has two cocktails on both sides of the frame. And even again, two detectives after him. So there was always this, that was an ongoing motif. You're right. I mean, it really pops out. I mean, he makes it quite obvious. I mean, maybe a viewer would have to look for all the details a few times, which is ultimately how he always enriched all of his movies. But yeah, there's tons of, I'm sure I missed a lot, but there's tons of those ongoing themes.
Well, a viewer on first screening might wonder about the dance sequence at the beginning.
That's right.
The ballroom dancing. And Joseph Cotton is one of the dancers. I'm pretty sure of it.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Well, I could be wrong,
Oh,
but as they're twirling around, they all look the same.
yeah, they do. Yeah.
And they're all moving in the same direction. But at one point, I'm pretty sure Joseph Cotton dancing and twirls around, probably with one of his widowed victims or victims to be, into the center of the dance floor. But it's right off at the beginning, and it looks like a scene from Little Women,
Mm.
Over top of the credits. And I kept thinking, what does this have to do with Shadow of a Doubt? And
Yes.
then, over time, the pin drops. But
Yeah, yeah. Of course, it's that song, the hymn, the Merry Widow hymn.
mhm.
I love that scene where it starts to hit too close to home when they're hymning it at the table, and then he knocks over the glass. It's interesting because he goes to such painstaking lengths in order to cover everything up by like getting rid of the newspaper, and that's ultimately what made Teresa Wright suspicious. He was hiding a newspaper that he didn't want anyone to see. And then when the detective tells her, what that he did something awful, then her first instinct is, I gotta go find that newspaper in the library. What's interesting though, and this is an ongoing criticism Hitchcock had, not by everybody, but certain critics, was looking at his movies and picking the sort of plot holes or things that were not necessarily plausible. Like, and this film has a number of those sort of I don't want to say holes, but flaws, if you will. Like, for example, when the detectives are after Joseph Cotton off the top, they don't know what he looks like, but yet they know where he is. So how can you be following someone you don't know what he looks like? That whole thing of needing his picture to get him just so that the witnesses could identify him, that made no sense to me, because they could just, if he was a suspect, they could easily bring him in. They didn't need a photo. Did that pop out to you as being totally
No,
totally off?
it didn't pop out to me, but it those kind no what I was too scratching my head over the fact that he wasn't smart enough not to regift his victims clothes and rings.
That
That
was another thing.
Yeah, that was what threw me. But I just went, okay, well, it's a vehicle to get the plot moving, to get him captured and stuff like that, and I'm all on board with that. Yeah, if something like that had occurred to me, how do that just does not make sense. That probably would take me a bit out of the movie.
Yes, exactly. He's clever enough that he never makes things so like way out of the realm of far-fetched that the audience will go, hang on a second. You have to, it's really maybe a little later that you'll start to, when you really think about it, because as he said, his primary concern was the emotion of the film. And because he sets everything up, particularly with his use of POV and like when Joseph Cotton is leaving that apartment off the top, he's constantly cutting from the close-up of Joseph Cotton walking and the POV of him looking at the detectives. So all that's happening to the audience is, oh, because we're on his side, we're sympathetic, as he's the main character. It's from his point of view, is I hope that he doesn't get spotted, or I hope they don't stop him. I hope he gets away. So then it becomes just that emotional feeling as opposed to anything necessarily logical. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, Hitchcock has said that he's making movies, he's making theater, and he's telling stories.
Right.
But to Hitchcock, it's just the story.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's to him. It was he can accept coincidences. He could accept irony, and again, he was always primarily concerned with the emotion, with the suspense, with how are we going to tell this story. The other, when you mentioned the ring that he would, why would he re-gift the ring that he stole? That could basically lock him up if that's basically evidence. I also thought it was interesting that once he got the ring back from her after she gives it to him because she knows that he killed one of the wives and one of the widows, and this ring belongs to one of them. The name was in the newspaper. When she tries to get it back, she goes into his bedroom. Within 5 seconds, she finds it. And I thought, if that were me, I would be throwing that thing in the ocean, you know?
Yeah.
But again, because you get so caught up in the fact that you know that Joseph Cotten and everybody's almost home and she's got to get the ring. And then that beautiful shot where she walks down the staircase and it zooms into the ring. So now Joseph Cotten's like, oh shit, she got the ring back. I'm going to have to kill her. You see, it's purely emotional. It purely plays on the audience's emotion in a manipulative way.
Yeah.
So I always find it fun to go back and look at the holes, you know, the plot holes, but ultimately they don't matter because
they don't.
It's the essence of the story that pulls you in. A love of an uncle who ends up being not at all what you think, and how that shatters this girl, really. I mean, I think that's quite devastating. You know, I think people can relate to that.
It is a shattering of innocence, and to an extreme. You pointed out that we know Joseph Cotten is the killer. We know that right from the beginning. But what's fascinating about the movie is the way Hitchcock, even though he's trying to kill Teresa, right? We know he's evil. We want there, at least I did, want there to be a mistake. We want there to be a misunderstanding.
Yes,
and Joseph Cotten is really a good guy because he's so damn charming.
Well,
when he comes in.
That's interesting because because there is that other suspect, you do think for a second, maybe this is all coincidence. Maybe it's a coincidence that the initials are the same inside the ring as the woman who's been killed. You know, it's possible because he doesn't actually say to her, "I did it." No. He just says, "Well, you don't know anything just because you read something in a paper." But then later on, he gives it more or less away. Right, but he goes, "Well, I'm going to get put in the electric chair." However, you could still think that he's only saying that because he's afraid he's going to be proven guilty for something he possibly didn't do. So I think he intentionally wrote it that way. So the audience is thinking, is it possible that it's not him? And Hitchcock in this movie, of course, he was so known for his POV shots because I'm feeling what this person's feeling as a result of that shot. And he uses this a lot for Joseph Cotten, but also for both Charlies. And your sympathy is going between the two, particularly that scene when the Hume Crone and the father, you know, they're those crime buffs, and they're talking about how the guy was caught and he died. He ran into a propeller, and you know, then Joseph Cotten is relieved because he's in the clear. And as he goes up the stairs, the music stops and he turns, and it's that POV. It's almost a scary shot, and again, you know what he's feeling is, oh, wait a minute, I'm not in the clear because of her. It's just so, you know, you're right. I mean, you are now empathizing with basically a killer, but he puts you there. You can't help it. Did any of his sort of classic touches, visual touch? I know we talked about a lot of them, but did anything else visually pop out as a very Hitchcockian touch to you?
You touched on it. The going upstairs, staircases, man.
Oh,
going either up or down the staircase and coming to Rebecca, the one where Cary Grant carries the milk and you think there might be poison.
Suspicion.
Suspicion. Gaslight, when they're coming down the stairs trying to escape without her husband seeing. Oh my God, Psycho. One of the great staircases. In Hitchcock. So that scene where he's on the staircase and he becomes aware that he's not safe. So danger somehow,
that's a good
going
point.
up or down the staircase seems to be a trope that he uses.
He always had like a tongue-in-cheek joke about that. I believe it was Ebert. I think you could find it on YouTube. Ebert asked him, you know, why he had staircases. So what was his fascination with stairs? And all he said was, well, it seems to me that stairs are used to walk up and down. And that's all he said. Just sometimes he didn't want to spill his secrets, you know, or his his inner workings, so to speak. I also really enjoy, and this is a recent guest I had on mentioned this, and his smaller characters or supporting parts, even if they're in a couple of scenes, they always are very distinctive. They always really bring in a strong point of view into that scene, and you don't see that as much with someone who may just be delivering news or pushing the story forward. In this case, in this film, we see the doctor on the train, for example, when Joseph Cotton is hiding and won't be seen on the train so that no one can recognize him. And the porter thinks that he might be sick. And that one doctor who says, well, I'm on vacation. I'm not here. Yeah. You can't help but then go into that guy's story. And even the waitress at the cocktail bar, who she's talking about, she's worked in so many bars around town, and she was a school friend of Charlie, the girl, the niece. And you see she's so tired, and she just seems like someone who had a rough break. And obviously Charlie is in a much better position than her. And I always find that fascinating, because you don't see that as much in those really small parts. Is that something that stood out to you, those kind of smaller roles?
Well, I think I'm not, I don't know if I was as aware of it as you were, but now I can't help but be aware of it. And I love your the way you phrased that, the way you put that, coined that. You can't help but know the doctor's story.
Yeah,
he doesn't want, he's a doctor's on holidays, he's worked too hard, he's also not gonna break into his what is it, Hippocratic oath or something, whatever.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And his wife, who's asking him to do this, right? She's she's clearly proud. She's married a doctor. She wants him to stand up. All these things happen in that little space of time.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. It's not just paper boy, here's your paper, off they go.
Yeah.
There's significant things. It almost makes you think that it's because of Hitchcock, the term "there are no small parts."
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think it goes to the fact that he looked at every frame as that canvas that he needs to fill, and he didn't necessarily want to make something general. Was there anything else you wanted to mention, Tom?
Well, this Shadow of the Doubt is easily one of my favorite Hitchcock films, and by no small coincidence, so is Strangers on the Train, which I think has very similar themes and styles to it. So these two movies have always long been my favorite Hitchcocks. I'm a big fan of The Birds too, by the way. This is just because I meant, and the reason I love The Birds.
So am I, and that's one of those films that some people are just totally disinterested in, even big Hitchcock fans.
Well, what I love about it is, and Psycho, is that it waits so long to get to where you're going, and that should normally be a real turnoff, and actually be something you would say, well, that's a bad director. He waited too long to get. No, he makes you wait for the payoff, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And done in such a tongue-in-cheek way. I mean, if you look at those stories on paper, they seem so silly and so ridiculous and so campy. And you can understand sometimes why some of the studios were like, because as you know, he produced Psycho because the studios were not interested, and because he just knew that he could make it scary, and he can make it dramatic, and he can make it somewhat funny in a dark, humor. I mean, he had that British sensibility to know that this plays on that roller coaster ride of emotions, that it's not going to be all scary, and it's not going to be all funny, and it's not going to be all sad, or all, it's going to be so much. And that's why I think they hold up, because it's on paper, someone must have just been like, what are you thinking?
killing your star halfway through.
Exactly.
But also the menace he has, and it's with Joseph Cotton in Shadow of the Doubt. It's with Bruno in Strangers on the Train. and it's with Psycho. The soliloquies, the conversations, and the something's just not right about what's being said, but I can't put my finger on it. And if I were to turn and leave now, I would look the fool,
Right.
because he's really not saying anything threatening, but the feeling is.
Absolutely.
And Shadow of a Doubt is just one of those great films. When I knew I was going to be on your show, and I had to rewatch it, I was a little bit nervous because I didn't want to not like it, but I didn't feel it was dated.
No, it doesn't.
And the sly sort of misogynist jokes that were funny at the time now just sort of are painted with a tinge of ignorance on the character's part.
Right.
And the girls step up and carry it. Not enough can be said about Annie, though.
Yeah, that's true. I liked her whole attitude of, not wanting to get the pencil to take the message.
Yeah.
Again, it's like he doesn't just have someone take the message. Like, I think, but he makes it a little more specific. He brings more behavior to all the parts, really. I mean, some of his roles, and he even felt that sometimes his characters were depicted one-dimensionally, which I think is often true, but they're not necessarily black and white. There are certainly shades of gray in a lot of his movies.
And what's interesting about the pencil scene is it's not a device. It's not, well, she didn't write the message down, so there was confusion and it led to this. It was simply, she just was a kid. She was reading her book. She didn't have time to get a pencil.
Yeah,
she couldn't be bothered.
Exactly, which is and I've done that as a kid.
I do that as an adult.
Yeah, or as an adult.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is only my second viewing, so it's a remarkable film. I should mention for anyone watching, because I know that these videos last on YouTube. So if you're seeing this any more than a week and a half from now, you'll have missed the Hitchcock conference that's happening next weekend, which is an online conference, which is October 1st to the 3rd. And I'm one of the presenters, actually, which I'm really looking forward to. And it's it's only $25 for 3 days. And there's a code they gave me for, I believe, a 10 or 15% discount, but it's already so reasonable. And I'll leave the code in the description box below. But it's a bunch of scholars and film buffs and enthusiasts who have various presentations about where love was a motivating factor in Hitchcock's movies, because we don't think of the love stories as much as we think of the suspense or the horror and stuff like that. So yes, it's next weekend, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, hitchcon.org. And I'll leave the link in the description box, because I think it's going to be, and even if you sign up and you only see a little bit of it, it'll be recorded and you can watch it on your own time. So they have a really good panel list. And I also want to mention that my Patreon membership, I actually have a Hitchcock tier. So I have a whole tier dedicated to Hitchcock. If anyone wants to sign up, the link is in the description box below as well. And there's an audio version of this podcast now, not just a video podcast, but you can get the audio podcast on anywhere that you get your podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and so on and so forth. And if this is your first time here on my podcast, please consider subscribing on YouTube by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You'll see it right here, floating above your head to your top left. Just click on that and then click the bell to get a notification every time I release a new video. Thom, thanks again. I always enjoy having you on. It's always
I always enjoy being on. And congratulations, your podcast is taking off. You're getting invited to seminars, and classes. This is very nice to hear.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay.
And we will see everyone in the next video.